All right, hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, BigTime and QuickBooks, how Berndt CPA has streamlined their clients' accounting systems with time tracking, billing, and project engagement. My name is Mackenzie, and I'm on the marketing team here at BigTime, and I will be kicking off today's webinar. So I am pleased to introduce today's speakers and an outline of our agenda. We will first hear from Stefan Mesjin, CPA and Senior Manager at Berndt CPA. He's going to share a client story and what an optimal accounting system for professional service firms looks like. We'll then hear from Jacob Wilson, our Sales Director here at BigTime. He'll give a foundational overview of the BigTime product, and then he'll show you how it integrates with QuickBooks in real time. But before I hand over the mic, I have a few housekeeping items to cover. First, please note that we will be recording today's webinar. We'll send it out to you in the next day or so. And next, we'd love to hear from you during the presentation. If you have any questions, please feel free to send them through the questions option in your control panel. We'll be answering these at the end of the session. And if you think of any additional questions following today's webinar, feel free to contact us at marketing@bigtime.net, or either of our speakers will have their contact info on the concluding slide. So without further ado, I'd like to kick things off by welcoming Stefan. Over to you.
Thank you, Mackenzie, for the intro, and a big thank you to BigTime's team for partnering with our firm on this. So a little background about myself and Berndt CPA. Berndt CPA, we're a technology-first focused firm, and we work with small businesses and entrepreneurs. We're located in Madison, Wisconsin, but our focus on technology allows us to work with clients across the country. I myself have been a BigTime user for about the past 3 years, and our firm has worked with architecture and engineering and other professional service firms implement and continue to support them in the BigTime plus QBO environment. Personally, my industry focus is on professional service firms, so I spend a considerable amount of time in this industry providing business and tax consulting to these firms. So our why. So why do we do this as a firm? So our small business and entrepreneurial clients rely on financial information to make decisions on a daily basis. So us as a firm, we're committed to helping these clients obtain this information using the best-in-class real-time cloud-based tools that ultimately end up providing a competitive edge to these clients. So as Mackenzie had mentioned earlier, I want to share a BigTime success story with you guys, but I also want to share a few scenarios that we see in the professional services industry prior to making a transition to a software like BigTime. So the first scenario that we tend to see is we see professional service firms that actually are not tracking time or expenses at all. These firms could be smaller firms or rather large. And what happens in these situations is the leadership or project managers may be invoicing projects on a fixed fee basis and just using their industry expertise or gut feelings as far as how well they performed on a job, how much to bill. And as you guys all know, that leaves much up to guesswork, and it doesn't really provide any accurate information about how well you actually performed on a job, or give you any information about what to use for future jobs. The second scenario we see is that we see firms identify that they need to track time and expenses, but they're doing this in something like Excel or even on paper. So what we see then is we see them tracking the time, tracking the expenses, and then manually entering this information into some legacy accounting system that's probably not cloud-based, and then they'll, enter invoices, print those invoices, and maybe even have to manually manipulate those invoices because that software does not allow a good customization for what they want to do with their invoicing. So again, it's an inefficient process. In this scenario, they actually have some good information, by time, by project, but the problem is they're just not using the right tool to gather that. Third scenario we see is that, you know, the firm has identified that they need some type of professional service automation software. So they may have a time and expense entry software in place, but that system is not integrated with their accounting system. So what happens in this scenario is the firms will run reports out of this time and expense system on some type of frequency, weekly, monthly, whatever that may be. And then they'll manually enter that information into their accounting system and an invoice out of that. So again, we're left with two systems. They're not talking to each other with different reporting. It's not efficient. It leaves room for error, and it's just not timely. It's not real time. When we have to do things manually, we run into problems. So next slide. So it looks like we have a polling question here. So we're curious, how is everybody currently managing time, expenses, and invoices within your accounting system? So you'll have about 20 seconds to answer. So are you guys entering it manually? Or do you have an integrated system? Or you're not sure what you're doing? So you'll have about 10 more seconds here to answer the polling question. Okay, so results are about 50-50 between we have an integrated system, it's all manual, and then there's one that I'm not sure. So I'm assuming I'm not sure one maybe is we're not tracking time and expenses at all, which is fine. So thank you for that info. So we had, so kind of into our story and into why BigTime can be useful for professional service firms. So we were contacted by a 20-employee successful and reputable architecture firm that had recently lost their office manager. And throughout conversations with leadership, we kind of learned what the roles were of that office manager and what she was in charge of. That included monitoring time and expense entry for all staff, invoicing, payroll submission. And to do all this, they were using a non-cloud-based legacy system, something like Sage or Peachtree. So with the departure of this office manager, the firm was left in a bad spot. The legacy system that they were using, it was near obsolete. So there were not that many users that actually knew how to use the system. Because it was non-cloud, they needed to find that person that was actually local because all the work needed to be done in-house. So the issue here on hand is they need to find someone fast, because without invoicing, you don't have cash in the door, and cash in the door is what keeps the lights on. So they had a burden here to find somebody fast. So we continue to work with them. You know, we work with their leadership team. We found out how they were tracking time. This current scenario, they were using Excel to track time. And what we found was the office manager would oftentimes have to go to the employees and talk to them and find out, hey, here's a time entry. It looks like it's coded to this client, to this project, to this phase, but can you explain, is this correct? So there's a lot of back and forth through that time entry process where the office manager needed to figure out where that time actually needed to get allocated within the accounting software that she's going to manually enter it into later. We also found that employees were waiting until the very last day of the 2-week. They were submitting their time bi-weekly, so they're waiting to the very last day to submit and enter their time. So we all know that's probably something that we've done before, but we also all know that studies have shown this behavior directly relates to the loss in revenues. Time should be submitted at least on a daily basis, but preferably ongoing throughout the day using a timer function. And what you want to do is provide the most thorough description as possible for each of those time entries. Without doing that, you're leaving money on the table. So she'd collect these timesheets and review them, work with the staff, and then get those entered into the accounting software. At that point in time, she had some decent reporting. She could print the report on paper and distribute it to the partners of the firm. What they would do is they would review the project status, mark up that report, and then circle what they wanted invoiced. So now they were at a point where they could actually start generating invoices out of their software. The next step though is, so they would generate their invoice on paper, partners would review, and the final step, because their software did not allow any customizations, they were stuck having to export it into another software, Microsoft Word in this example, make the customizations and go off to their client. So a lot of inefficiencies with that process. The truth is though, for this firm, it was not all bad. The positives that came out of this exercise was they already understood and valued the importance of the info that they were collecting. So they knew they needed to collect that information. It's just they needed the right tool to get that done. So that's when we started talking to them about BigTime. And anytime we are involved in a possibility of a BigTime onboarding, the first thing we always do is do a live demo with BigTime. So it's generally the leadership team, our firm, and BigTime in a virtual webinar. It's like we talk about functionality. It's a Q&A session, opportunity for leadership to ask questions about functionality with BigTime. And then we also discuss potential workflows that would fit into the client's current processes. So this initial meeting serves as a good introduction of how BigTime could actually fit into the firm's internal framework. So I just wanted to highlight a few other main discussions that we have prior to implementation. And first, what we really have found important is that we need buy-in from leadership, buy-in and commitment. So in our experience, we found that everyone in the firm, including the leadership team, needs to be on the same page. So they need to be following the same protocol. For example, if we are requiring staff to enter time on a daily or on an ongoing basis throughout the day, the leadership team needs to lead by example. They need to be doing the same. Another key decision point that we talk about is who is going to be the BigTime champion for this transition. So someone within this firm needs to take ownership of the transition, to communicate with BigTime, to communicate with our firm, and to communicate internally with people who have questions about the new software. So that's been very important to identify that person. In this scenario that we're discussing, it was the new office manager who came in who ended up being the BigTime champion, and that made sense for that situation. So then we kind of we went through the roles of the different staff and responsibilities that they had within the firm. Who all is going to be entering and approving time? Who's going to be approving expenses? Who's going to be approving invoices? What are the frequency of all these approvals? So kind of set those standards, map it out, and see what makes sense from a systems point of view. What is most efficient for this firm? You know, then we kind of touched on the new client and project setup. Who's going to be doing that? What information are we going to collect at that point in time? Are we going to collect budgeted hours? Are we going to collect budgeted fees? You know, and what is the expectation for the firm as far as how fast are we going to get that new client set up and ready to go so people can start putting time to that client, put expenses to that client? And the last major thing that we kind of talk about is, what are we going to provide for user rights? BigTime is completely customizable. You'll see that with the reporting. You'll see that with their dashboards. And then it's the same with their user rights and roles. What permissions are we going to allow certain staff to do? And that's completely flexible. And the key issue here to think about is, although BigTime, you can grant 100% access to somebody in BigTime, that does not mean they're going to have 100% access to, let's say, your QBO, where all your accounting and personal or your private financial information is going to be held. So you do have a little extra layer of security there if you want that. So the last thing that we kind of talk about prior to the transition is, let's just set up a timeline for this implementation. And a few of those key dates are, we need to establish a date where we're going to have all these active clients and jobs set up in BigTime. That's an important date to know. all the staff need to be trained. So some staff need to be trained just to enter time and expenses. Others need to be trained on how to approve. Others need to be trained on how to invoice, run reports, etc. So we need to identify the needs of those staff, get them trained, and set up a due date on that. Populate accounts receivable. That's another important piece. So you're going to be transitioning from an old system where all your customer balances are held, all your accounts receivable balances are held. You need to get that information into BigTime by customer, by job, so you have accurate information going forward. And then lastly, agree upon a go live date. What date can we tell everyone that, hey, January 1st, 2020, BigTime is on, time and expenses go in all day long. This is the start date. So that needs to happen. So I did see that there was a number of accounting firms that were on the webinar today. So I wanted to just share a kind of side note with what our firm has done with BigTime as a service offering for our clients. So as you can see here, the story that I've told, there's a large opportunity, a huge consulting opportunity here for your firm's professional service clients. So I would just think about the value of the efficiencies and time by implementing something like BigTime could save your clients. You know, how we work, we typically help our clients through the implementation stage. So we're providing services through the implementation stage with them. And also, once they're set up, we help them ongoing monthly, as far as the ongoing monthly work with BigTime and QBO integration. So that's another separate service offering that we offer our clients, and those are recurring monthly fees. So just a side note for the accounting professionals that are on the webinar today. So the results. So what we end up with when we have BigTime implemented is we end up with an all-inclusive, integrated, real-time, cloud-based system. And that is a mouthful. But let's talk about what does that mean. What that means is all time and expenses are entered into BigTime. And everything then flows seamlessly through from BigTime into your accounting system. This flow of work ensures that all time and all expenses are not lost or unbilled. And through this process, there's no duplication of efforts. Invoicing. All of the time and expense entries are in BigTime. All of the invoicing is done in BigTime. This ensures, again, all time and expenses are being billed. There's no room for error here. Everything is within the system. Everything that comes in goes out. Efficiency on invoicing. We kind of talked about that earlier. We need to be able to get invoices out within a day. This gives us the opportunity to do that with the built-in seamless approvals process. As long as the time entries are happening real time and approvals are happening when there should be, there's no reason we can't get those invoices out within a day. Project management. This may be a completely new tool if you don't already have a PSA software in place. If we have the ability to set up budgets by project, by phase, by task, and if it's set up that way, we have the ability to have a real-time live picture of where we're at within any job, any project, any phase, and all of our team members will have real-time on-demand reporting capabilities to see that information. And the last piece of this is the resource allocation tools. Again, if we're set up properly, BigTime has a resource allocation piece that will allow us to forecast revenues and also forecast out staff capacities to see, hey, which staffer has availability to take on this new job, or which one do we need to take some time away from so they can focus on completing the jobs that they already have on task. A few other points here that just to touch on quickly. WIP, work in progress. This is one of the most important KPIs to track for professional service firms. And oftentimes when we step into the game, the firms have not even thought about work in progress. They don't even know what it is. So making it first off, understand it. Second off, you need to have a tool like BigTime that makes it easy to track and monitor WIP. So by understanding work in progress and tracking it, the firm was able to bill more and collect cash faster. And then the last 2 points I have about the system when it's in place is you need a system that's mobile so you can do it anywhere. I mean, there's a mobile app, it's cloud-based, etc. You need to have a mobile system, and it needs to be scalable. So if you have a system like BigTime, you can implement today and it can grow with your firm, you should be set for the future. So my key takeaways of getting this BigTime system set up and in place, it really boils down to this. If you are tracking time that gets billed, you need to have a PSA software in place. And you know, if you're currently using a manual or a non-integrated system, there's a better way to do it. There's a better tool for the job. So as Mackenzie said, I'm going to introduce Jacob, who's going to be showing you how QBO and BigTime can integrate.
Hey everyone, Jacob with BigTime, Director of Sales here. As Mackenzie had mentioned, and Stefan, appreciate the introduction and the story that you told about, you know, firms coming to your accounting practice, looking for help, trying to solve for that, really that disconnected workflow. You know, having, whether it be different systems in place for time, expenses, hopefully project managers aren't, you know, keeping track of those budgets in their head, or really knowing kind of where anything stands. So which really causes them to have, you know, no single source of reporting. So definitely excited to take a deep dive into a BigTime account and really focus on how seamless our integration is with QuickBooks. Before then though, would love to just do a quick poll with the audience and just hear from you. You know, do you currently use QuickBooks? Is it the online version? We see that quite often. We still see probably over 50% of our clients and prospective clients on that desktop version of QuickBooks. No worries there, because we have that seamless integration we've built given our 17 years experience working with them. So let's take a look at what we heard back from the audience, and I'll share that with all of you. So it looks like it's almost split, 50-50. So a lot of people still using that online version, which it's awesome, just because cloud-to-cloud integrations make it very easy and seamless with you. But then also that desktop integration still out there. I don't think it's going away anytime soon. So I'm excited to kind of show you exactly how we work with those self-hosted QuickBooks solutions, given all that year's experience here. But always great to see. So just before diving in, love to touch on a little bit of what we're going to be reviewing today in the solution overview. So as there's a lot of different systems that specialize in a single thing like time tracking or expense tracking or project management, the true power of BigTime as a PSA solution is being able to bring that all within one application. That way the staff are just using, you know, one app to track both time and expenses, and project managers are being able to approve those, you know, whether it be a single or multiple level of approval, get real-time reporting into things like their budget status, also managing staff workflow capacity. And then we'll look at the invoicing. You know, that's a feature everyone's a little reluctant or hesitant to explore, just because, you know, we're invoicing out of QuickBooks. At the end of the day, we need to have our revenue over in QuickBooks, which no worries. Last step to that invoice process, which we'll take a look at, is seamlessly pushing a button and getting those invoices added over there too. And if any of you are working with some government or federal contracts and you follow a DCAA compliant accounting practice, just know we also have you covered there, as we have a DCAA module that's going to help enforce some of the time tracking guidelines with like audit log notes, electronic signatures, all of this great stuff. But then what we're going to do is, like I mentioned, focus a lot on the QuickBooks side of things. So I see some questions coming through already about, you know, how we integrate with QuickBooks, how long does it take to get implemented, all of that great stuff, at which we'll touch on. But before even diving into it, just know it's definitely a bidirectional sync. So exchanging data to and from QuickBooks and initially pulling a lot of great information into BigTime. Things like your customer and job lists, your employee lists, your, vendors and different, lists to help manage transactions like, items, pay items, expense accounts, classes, which we'll all use a bunch of different ways within BigTime. And we always love to say, we like to flex and bend BigTime to fit your existing QuickBooks and accounting structure, just to help make this transition as smooth as possible without you having to really kind of gut all of the great things that you have going on in QuickBooks already today. So I think this is a great point. Let's just go ahead and dive right into BigTime and start taking a look at exactly how this is going to work for you as a professional service firm, or maybe even just your clients as you start to recommend BigTime and incorporate that into both one-off services, but also some of those monthly recurring services as well. So what we're looking at here, this is the first thing that someone with administrative access to BigTime is going to be taking a look at. As Stefan mentioned, a lot of times companies don't want to give their staff or their project managers full visibility into everything that they have going on inside of their accounting software. So another benefit of BigTime is being able to control that on a lot more granular basis. And you can have controls kind of firm-wide, like when me as a time tracker logs in, I'm not going to see any company revenue as to what we've invoiced or how utilized our staff is. I'm really just going to see my timesheet first, front and center. Or maybe I'm a project manager. Maybe I should get access to budget reports. That's something you can easily control throughout BigTime and make adjustments to that as your business continues to grow and scale. But what we'll be doing in this solution overview is we're first going to be taking a look at a little bit around our project setup, how projects even get into BigTime, what's included with setting up a project, what are things that we can get out of it in terms of the project management, maybe resource management aspect. But then let's just jump in and start tracking some time and expenses. Show you how we'll try to make that burdensome process a little less painful by making it readily accessible to staff and help a solution like BigTime control kind of what information you need to capture for that reporting and those critical KPIs. And then after that, we'll create some invoices, send a bunch of data over to QuickBooks, show you how that appears. And then we're going to leave it open for questions at the end. Love to hear from the audience what all comes up throughout. So as those questions come up, there's a question section in this webinar. Please do fire those off. If we're unable to get to some of them, no worries. We're just going to be able to follow up with each of you individually and maybe offer a more personalized solution overview. But to start, jumping up to this My Company and Our Project list. So here's a list of all of my customers and jobs. Great thing is, you're not going to have to manually input this data into BigTime initially to get up and running. So as we have that deep integration with both the desktop and online versions of QuickBooks, you will be able to get those integrated with BigTime in under 5 minutes, which our support team helps with that. And by doing so, we're automatically pulling and populating all of these customers and jobs into your BigTime account, as well as things like your staff too. But then moving forward, it's totally up to you as a BigTime user what this workflow is going to look like as to how these projects get into BigTime. You can definitely add those projects directly into QuickBooks, pull them into BigTime, or maybe it's someone like a sales rep or a project manager that first gets access to this information. Maybe we use Salesforce. So let Salesforce pull those sales opportunities into BigTime, create those projects. So we can always add them one-off, or they can flow over from our CRM. So I can add a brand new client, brand new project, always add projects to existing clients. But we have Aaron's automotive design over here, and we're working on a car app for this client. So right here, we're just on this project dashboard. It's just some basic information to start. So on this dashboard, we have things like description, project IDs, the type of project it is. But since I just added this directly into BigTime, I get the option over here to go ahead and push and add this to my QuickBooks file. We're really, really big on one single point of data entry. So we never want any of you to have to enter the same information more than once, whether it's one of these customers, jobs, staff, time, expenses, invoices, payments, all of that stuff can flow to and from QuickBooks. And as this BigTime account's connected to our desktop version of QuickBooks, we have this BigTime Sync Agent. So this is a syncing tool that we used, or we've developed ourselves, given our 17 years experience working with QuickBooks. And this sync tool acts as the middleman between QuickBooks being located on your computer in the office, or maybe you have it hosted by a QuickBooks hosting provider like Right Networks. So your QuickBooks is located on a server, BigTime's located in the cloud, so you get remote access anywhere in the world. So we essentially just push this project from BigTime in the cloud down to the sync tool, and this will sync automatically. Now, for those of you, the 51% on the call that uses QuickBooks Online, don't worry about that. You don't have to use the middleman since it's that direct cloud-to-cloud integration. But as we've just ran that sync, I already get to see here on this project record that this BigTime project is now linked to this customer and job over in QuickBooks. So automatically sends that information over. And now that we have this project in both BigTime and QuickBooks, we're able to now build this project out with a lot more detail than what we'd ever care to have over in our accounting software. So this dashboard, as I mentioned, some basic info. You have like project notes or some notes I need to show up on every invoice. We have different PO numbers, XYZ, 1, 2, 3, 4 for this project. These are custom fields down here. So as well as any of these red drop-down arrows, like a project type, you get to customize these, make them your own. You don't have to rely on a developer or the BigTime support team to handle that. So you can customize the field drop-downs. You can also customize different fields that you're able to report on, whether we want that field to be, an integer, a currency, a date, a lookup field, whatever you'd like. So really just flex and bending BigTime to make it your own here. But moving across this project setup, contact info, very straightforward, client contact information. We have Aaron here listed as a primary contact, but Jerry's actually going to be our billing contact. So we're going to pull Jerry's name on that invoice. Within BigTime, you're able to specify a project team, have a lot of great controls around this too. So I have Whitney here listed as our project manager, and she's going to be our team lead. So if we're wanting to require time, maybe even expenses to go through a formal approval workflow before that time hits an invoice, I can start delegating that authority down to someone like Whitney. I can also control who has access to this project on their timesheets. So as your business grows and scales, you have a lot of great billable project work going on, your staff is starting to expand. Why clutter up a timesheet for projects that they may or may not be working on? So can have further controls with this. But a great benefit of BigTime and invoicing out of BigTime is going to be some bill rates here. So we see a lot of firms that tend to invoice out of QuickBooks having an extremely long list of service items. So they might have 5 or so staff working on a project billed out at certain rates, but of course those 5 staff are billed out at different rates for a different project. So a lot of times firms tend to use that service item list in QuickBooks to help manage that, which makes it very difficult, especially for an end user to come in and track time on a regular basis. So instead in BigTime, we can use some standard rate cards. I can associate rates with my staff, maybe like a flat rate. I don't care who you are, you're billed out at $100 an hour. But as we worked solely with professional service firms, we know that these rates tend to change all the time. So in this case, yeah, we're using some standard rates for a few staff members, but anytime Whitney works on this project, she's actually being billed out at $200 an hour. I'm billed out at $135. So having the controls to set this up on this project by project basis is huge. It's something you set up once, you forget it, and not having to make any changes unless you need to during the invoicing process. And then how these rates will pull in for the project management also helps under tasks. So the task section is where all of you are going to be able to start recreating that. that scope of work and really putting in these project deliverables. So as we're working on this new car app, we're just doing some standard, kickoff call, doing some design, develop, test, and then we're deploying it, but we're planning on rolling this out in a couple different phases. So we can budget out hours, fees, and even expenses in here, track and manage start and due dates to get a sense of that project timeline. But maybe these subtasks are internal. The client doesn't need to see that we're budgeting these different rollout phases separate. So keep that in mind when I show you when it comes to our invoicing, the level of control that we're going to have, not only with the level of detail we show, but being able to do a lot of great rolled up reporting on not just budgets, but also invoice dollars on this stuff. So now building out that statement of work, project managers coming in to be able to manage those project timelines with Gantt chart features. It's definitely an interactive Gantt chart, so being able to shift around these timelines, make some dependencies in here, see how it all compares against a baseline that we're able to set. And then project managers or maybe department managers could also come in and start forecasting the resources that they need for these projects, and being able to identify, like, hey, I know, for that kickoff call, we're budgeting 8 hours. Whitney's going to be working on that in the week of the 3rd. Design, here's a couple staff that's working on it, and being able to project out the time that they think they're going to be able to spend, just to really get a sense of the staff capacity, how utilizes our staff, and getting that forward-looking view. Hey, in the next 6 months, we think we're going to close this large, ERP implementation. Is that something we're going to have to go out there to our consulting network to bring on new staff and resources to help deliver this? Or even on the flip side, if I have a lot of salaried employees like Charlie and Peyton, looking 3 to 6 months ahead, do we even have enough project work to keep them billable, or do they have some of that upcoming bench time coming up? So a lot of great reporting, visibility into things like that, and some revenue projections. But the project setup, that can go very quick. Though we sat there and we talked about it, just being able to jump in, add the project, at least assign a project manager, and put in your tasks, deliverables, and budgets. The 10 minutes it takes to set up a project is going to save countless hours, the entire length of that project, that you would spend otherwise just manually trying to update that information over in Excel or outside of something like BigTime. So now that we have projects set up, we've synced it with QuickBooks, so now that data's over there. Now time tracking becomes seamless and easy. So right here we have a weekly timesheet view, and this is really the first thing that the staff sees when they log in. So I'm just logged in as myself, and it's like a spreadsheet view. I have the project, what task we're working on, throwing in some hours here. So on Tuesday we worked 5 hours on the design, working hard on the app design, and maybe today we wrap that project up for 3 hours, and you're able to put a lot of controls when it comes to your timesheet. So have that enforce the process that you want, and have it enforce the capture of this information that you need when it comes to the reporting and the invoicing. So notes are required. I forgot them. So here we'll just say wrapped up final design. We're done. So now as soon as the staff come in here and save that time, whether it's on the web interface, the iPhone or Android app, now that gets kicked into our reporting, so real-time budget reports. And at the end of the day, every other week, however often you want this information to flow over to invoicing, we can come in and kind of formally submit that timesheet. So as we did, now staff's not going to be able to come in and change those hours and mess with the reporting. So time's locked. And that's the same concept when it comes to our expenses. So within expenses, we have a bunch of previously submitted expense reports that we can always print off, check out some receipts as a PDF just for our own kind of internal reference. But adding a new expense is seamless. And we can add expense entries, we can add credit card charges, even these vendor expenses, a new feature we just rolled out in the last month or so. But first, just starting with like staff reimbursable. You have a list of expense types, something that you create, you control, either building off of our existing like list and options, or even just running with that. And then each of these expense types, we're able to link back to our QuickBooks file. And we're linking it to either an expense account, cost of goods sold, maybe a service item. So we have airfare. Maybe I just bought that for that car app today. I don't know, let's say $250, and it was for that kickoff meeting, and it was a round trip flight. So putting in notes, and the great thing is capturing the receipts based off of this. So I'm able to select the receipt that's saved on my computer, or just use that BigTime mobile app. So just take a picture of that receipt, attach it to the expense. I always choose it from my photo library. No difference either way. So that's really all that's needed for a staff reimbursable expense. But as I mentioned, we also help manage vendor bills and vendor expenses. So let's say I just reached out, and a part of this project, we're gonna tap into our consultant network. So they just sent us an invoice. So now I'm gonna put that into BigTime to apply it against the budget, include it on an invoice, and at the end of the day, also send it to QuickBooks. So I don't have to re-enter this information. So it's all the same views, except now we have this vendor dropdown. Here's a list of vendors that's pulled seamlessly from our QuickBooks. I'm able to throw in a reference number, what type of expense. Again, make that your own. I just have this generic vendor expense. We're still working on that car app, and maybe it was, I don't know, $1,200 for the design aspect. And we got that contractor invoice, see attached. And maybe this contractor invoice, it's a PDF. We can definitely save that as a receipt too. So now we've logged staff reimbursables, a vendor related expense, and just like with time, we're eventually clicking at the bottom of the screen to submit that. I'm just going to choose this project worth of expenses. I have a couple other projects. I'll wait and submit those at the end of the month. But now it's out of that staff member's hands and out of their unsubmitted expense queue. And now we just trigger that approval workflow, which we could take a look at. But just for the sake of time, would love to focus on the invoicing in BigTime. So as we're able to streamline the capture of time and expenses, do the approval workflow, we're managing bill rates, managing budgets. Now we get a lot of great reporting around all of our work in progress within BigTime. How many draft and final invoices do we have out there? Total AR aging, which this pulls seamlessly from QuickBooks 2. And we can see what that invoiced and AR is on a month-by-month basis, and it's an interactive graph. Let's drill down into those. So let's just take a look at the work in progress. So this shows every single one of my client projects, the total amount of unbilled time. What does that come out to in terms of fees and expenses? And you can always filter this. So maybe this car app's got a unique invoice cycle. So typically we bill once a month at the beginning of the month for the prior period. This client, they want to see it like semi-monthly. So I just need to look at the 1st through the 15th. So let's filter our WIP by that. So I have 4 projects, and here's that car app. Well, before I start invoicing for this, I can always drill down into all the time entries and see exactly what we'd be invoicing for it. And if maybe mistakes weren't caught in that invoice review and approval or time review and approval process, we can always come in and make individual time entry changes and adjust things like your input hours versus your billable hours. So myself, I worked 3 hours on this. I need to get credit for that. I need to get paid for that. So maybe we can only bill the client one of those hours. Something you have complete control over. But we'll just say what we have here, it's good to go. So I'm going to create an invoice, and there's a handful of different invoice calculators that come standard in every BigTime account. Our fixed fee invoices, which pull those task records from that project setup, and it pulls those budgets so we can bill it either at a milestone or a progress bill based off of a % complete. But this time I'm just going to choose a time and material invoice. And the great thing is, not only can I manage what kind of transactions am I going to put on this bill, but how do I want to format that, or how do I want to like show that to a client on an invoice? So there's different ways to summarize this. Maybe some firms, they really need to show a summary of the staff. So here's Charlie. He works 17 hours at $150 an hour versus Peyton only worked 12 hours at $140 an hour. But seeing that we've given the client that proposal, we showed them what they can expect in terms of what we budgeted by each one of those tasks, we see it's pretty common for them, even on a time and material invoice, to group it as such. So once I finalize an invoice, it's great because we show up on this invoice draft. So this is just a summary. By no means do we have to show this level of information on an invoice, but we got the basics of invoice numbers, what period it is, PO numbers, can pull from that project record. Looks like I didn't save it. Terms, again, pulling from QuickBooks, it's linked. But then, though this is the summary, behind the scenes, we have all the time and expense detail that made that invoice up. So now you get to send the client an invoice directly out of BigTime. So we have some invoice templates that you get to control. So hopefully we can get away with showing some summary information. If not, some clients want to show a T&M invoice with a ton of details that I have listed here. So I just shot them to a PDF, but like I mentioned, you can definitely email them out of BigTime. But just to show a little bit about what level of information we can have here. So we have the tasks. So I guess start up top. Our invoice, the client's contact information, showing stuff like the period or PO number. And here it shows the task breakdown, what the total budget is. So a lot of you that invoice on a fixed fee basis, looks like Barbara's got some questions around that. The calculator would be slightly different, but maybe this top section is very similar to what you show around the budget, what's been previously billed, what's due this time, what's remaining. But in this case, we're showing it as an hourly one, so they can see that we've gone over quite a bit on that kickoff already. It's showing some expense detail and it's showing some receipts, but maybe they come back and now we have to show a lot more detail in that. So same information up top around the budget status, but then down below we can start getting into showing what the staff role was, the date, notes or descriptions from a timesheet, hours. You can definitely show rates and amounts here. But overall, just having that control, having the flexibility, and catering to the client's needs within reason, of course, utilizing BigTime's invoicing templates. And at the end of the day, we can fire off an invoice review and approval process too. I can bulk post invoices to QuickBooks. But just to give you a quick idea, now I'm just sending this invoice over there, one off, so pretty seamless. What is that, 2 clicks of a button? And maybe we'll jump over and we'll post some time. So here's all of my staff's time, checking it off, sending it from BigTime directly to QuickBooks. We have a handful of expense reports we'll post, and we even have some vendor-related expenses down below. Let me open that up in a new tab. Take a look. So it's just the one reliable vendor down there for that $1,200 we sent. And as we send that to QuickBooks, and imagine sending hundreds of hours for your team, if not thousands, we never want you to leave you guessing as to what goes over there and what doesn't. So we say post the data, run a sync for you desktop users, QuickBooks Online, don't even worry about it. And then we'll actually see this sync start adding data directly over to QuickBooks, like 15 different transactions in this case. And before I go looking for it, I just refresh my page here in BigTime and hopefully see that red cloud turn into a green check mark. That lets me know that it's now flown over there. So now opening up this desktop file, we sent a bunch of stuff. So here's Aaron's automotive design. So here's the customer and job. On that job record, we sent over an invoice, same task descriptions, same dollar amount, Great thing is too, you can come in, apply payment on this invoice, and have AR automatically sync back to BigTime. But then we posted, I believe we posted some time entries. So let's check out my own timesheet as an employee. So here's the customer and job, my payroll items, even notes from a timesheet tend to flow over. And we sent over a bunch of vendor-related bills. That reliable vendor here. So here's the $1,200 for that vendor expense, contractor invoice, see attached, the dollar amounts associated with classes, but also that customer and job here. And then we're also posting those employee reimbursables too. So as you see here, there's a lot that we can do. I know we're moving fast and clicking through it a lot, but at the end of the day, in 30 minutes, we've created projects, tracked time and expenses, billed for it, and then with just a few clicks of a button, sent that data over to QuickBooks. So that's what I had in mind to walk us through. I think now is a great time, as we have about 7 minutes left, just to go through some of the questions that the audience is chatting in. So let me pull that up on my other screen just to read through some of them. So up top, I believe it's Christina. Christina asks a little bit about, and also, let's see, Sharon too, is asking a little bit about the implementation process. What's involved, who's included, so that's great. And a little bit about BigTime's implementation. We have a professional service and customer success team internally that helps hold your hand through that process. So the moment you partner with BigTime, you are assigned a dedicated customer success rep that's going to be your main point of contact during that implementation period. And luckily, the timeline of that is drastically reduced, just given that we're able to streamline and automate 75+% of the data entry that it takes to get BigTime up and running, just by connecting it to QuickBooks. So as we pull all those customers and jobs into BigTime, now it's just a matter of, assigning the project manager, putting in your bill rates, and putting in budgets. And we also take like a phased rollout approach. So crawl, walk, run. We definitely don't want you to feel like you have to have BigTime set up 100% before rolling it out to the team. We always recommend just setting up some of the base foundational information first, just to get you to the point to where staff can start tracking time and expenses right away. And as they're tracking their time and expenses now, it buys your implementation team, a couple days, a couple weeks to now be getting training on things like our invoicing and reporting. And all of that's definitely supported too. Like, you will have full unlimited access to our help desk that's all located here in Chicago. So all of our clients get email, chat, and even phone support too. So we always say, if you find yourself spending more than 10 minutes working on something, pick up the phone, just give us a call. And it looks like Sherry's chatting in some questions, asking how much time do we typically see clients save when switching to BigTime? And you know what, Stefan, that might be best for you. What do you typically see as you're offering this type of service?
Yeah, that's a great question. And from what we see, we really think that invoicing is probably the biggest efficiency gain here. And I've seen clients go from taking 2 to 3 weeks to get the approvals, to get the invoices generated, to get them mailed, to actually getting it done, within a 24-hour period of time. So there's big efficiency gains just within the invoicing process itself.
Yeah, and that's just one aspect too. So if we're able to, get the back office team a couple days back in the month, just imagine the other projects that are just kind of put on hold over the years waiting for that.
Yeah, exactly.
And then we see some questions asking around some QuickBook classes. Though we didn't touch on that in detail, we definitely work with QuickBook classes. And again, we like to consult on how to set up BigTime, all depending on a few key things. What do you want to report on? What do you show on an invoice? But more importantly, like, how's your QuickBooks file set up? So if you're using QuickBooks classes for, a partner, project manager, a line of business, we'll recommend one of the 4 ways that BigTime can work with that, so that when we're sending all that transactional information like time, expenses, and invoices, all that data is automatically linked to that class without having to do any like manual intervention here. And then we see, let's see, we have time for maybe one more here. Let's see, we see some people asking about like how customizable roles are. I think that's coming from Sharon. Sharon, the roles in BigTime, just as with every other kind of drop-down field, you get complete control over that. So we don't want to flex or like make you fit into what pre-populated drop-downs that we offer, let's call it out of the box. We really encourage you to come in and during your implementation process, working with, either an outsourced accounting firm, someone like Berndt CPA, or with our customer success team to help consult on, like, hey, this is what we're trying to report on. Here's the roles that we typically have staff working on a project. You own it. So you'll have control to go in there and add those fields without really relying on BigTime or, a developer to populate some of those. All right, so that concludes my part of the demo and solution overview.
Awesome, thanks, Jacob. Those were some great questions. Thanks to everyone who attended. We appreciate you being here. And we have the contact details for our speakers on this slide. Beyond that, if there's anything you want to re-reference or share with your teammates, look out for the recording. We'll send it your way in the next day or so. In the meantime, thanks again, and we'll see you guys next time.
Thanks, everyone.